I was standing in the kitchen when I realized my wife had been paying the same man every month for 3 years. Same amount, same date, different account number. The paper was still in my hand when I turned it over and saw her handwriting on the back. Just 2 words, not a full sentence, not an explanation. 2 words that didn't belong on a bank statement. I'll tell you what they said later, but I'm getting ahead of myself, because at that point, I didn't even know whose account it was. I just knew it wasn't one I recognized. And I know our accounts. I set them up. I balanced them every Sunday night at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and that same cheap calculator I've had since before we moved into this house. There was something else that morning, too. Something small. The return address printed slightly crooked on the envelope. I remember noticing it. Just barely off-center. I almost tossed it without opening it. Almost. Anyway, name's Mickle. Most folks just call me Uncle Mickle. I'm not anybody's uncle by blood except my sister's boys. But the name stuck somewhere along the way. I'm in my late 40s. Work maintenance for a regional trucking company. Been married 22 years. Or, I guess it was 22. It was quiet in the house that afternoon. The kind of quiet you don't notice until something breaks it. Fridge humming. Clock ticking. Wind pushing lightly against the kitchen window over the sink. I remember the light coming in sideways, because it was late enough that the sun had shifted past the maple tree in the yard. I wasn't looking for trouble. I grabbed the mail off the porch like I always did. Electric bill. Grocery store flyer. A bank envelope with our usual logo in the corner. Same blue stripe. Same windowed address panel. Our last name printed clean across the front. I slid it open without thinking. The statement inside had her name at the top, which wasn't unusual. We've got joint accounts and individual ones. We always kept a little independence that way. Healthy, we said. But the account number underneath her name, it didn't match anything I'd ever seen. And I noticed numbers. That's just how my brain works. I thought maybe it was an old savings account I'd forgotten about. We opened a few over the years for different things. Vacation fund. Home repairs. I think there was even a new couch account once. Or maybe that was just a folder. No, it was an account. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I sat down. That's when I saw the transfers. First one dated 3 years back. Then another the next month. Then another. Same exact amount every time. Not rounded. Not random. Precise down to the cent. It wasn't a small amount. Not huge either. Just enough to matter. The recipient name wasn't listed clearly. Just an external transfer number. No memo. No note. Clean. Quiet. Consistent. 3 years. That's what got me. 3 years means habit. Means intention. Means routine. I remember thinking there had to be a mistake. Banks mess up. Envelopes get swapped. Maybe this was meant for another address, and somehow landed in ours. I even looked at the mailbox outside to make sure our numbers were still visible. They were. The envelope had our address, her name, and that slightly crooked return address. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper. It felt warm from my hands. The air in the kitchen had gone still, like even the hum of the fridge had lowered a notch. Probably didn't. Just felt that way. I told myself not to jump. There are explanations for things. There always are. I stood up, folded the statement once, then unfolded it again. That's when I noticed the back of the page. Handwriting. Blue ink. Slanted slightly to the right. 2 words. I didn't recognize them at first, because I wasn't expecting them to be there. They weren't large. Just written near the bottom margin, like someone testing a pen. I stared at them longer than I want to admit, and that's when the floor shifted. Not physically, just internally, because those 2 words weren't casual. They were deliberate, and I knew, in a way I couldn't yet explain, that whatever those transfers were, they weren't an accident. I folded the paper carefully that time, set it back in the envelope, and for about 15 minutes, I convinced myself this was nothing. That's the part nobody tells you about moments like this. The mind doesn't explode. It negotiates. And I was about to start negotiating hard. I didn't confront her that night. That might surprise you. But routine is a powerful thing. And we had one. She got home around 6:10 most evenings. Not 6 o'clock. Not 6:15. 6:10. I used to tease her about it. Said she must sit in the driveway for 10 minutes before coming inside, just to keep it consistent. She'd laugh. Say traffic lights had personalities. That evening was no different. I'd put the statement back in its envelope and slid it under the stack of other mail on the counter. Not hidden, just delayed. There's a difference. She came in carrying her tote bag and that stainless steel water bottle she'd been using for years. Set her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. Kissed my cheek. Asked what smelled good. I'd made chili. Nothing dramatic happened. She changed into sweatpants. We ate at the table. Talked about her co-worker Denise and some new scheduling software that wasn't working right. I nodded in the right places. I think I did. I remember watching her hands more than her face. The way she held the spoon. The small burn scar near her wrist from when we first moved into this house, and she grabbed the wrong pan, without a mitt. Normal hands. That's what bothered me. 3 years of transfers didn't live in those hands. Not on the surface. After dinner, I did what I always do on Sundays. Brought my calculator to the table. She sat on the couch with her laptop. The TV murmured something neither of us was really watching. That's when the first red flag, the one I ignored years ago, floated back up. About 3 years ago, maybe a little more, she'd said she wanted to simplify her finances. Said it stressed her out keeping track of everything. I offered to handle it, like I always had. She said no, gently but firm. Wanted one account just in her name for personal spending. I shrugged. Sounded reasonable. Independence and all that. The second thing, it's smaller. But I keep replaying it. She started taking out small amounts of cash once a month. Not big withdrawals. Just enough that I noticed the ATM receipt, sometimes on the dresser. I asked once what it was for. She said birthday gifts, office collections, random stuff. I didn't press. Maybe I should have. There's this quiet pride a man can carry about being easygoing. About not being controlling. I wore that pride like a badge. Told myself trust meant not checking. I wonder sometimes if I was the only one who just accepted it for so long. Because it's easier to be the good husband than the suspicious one. Anyway, that night, after she went to bed, I went back to the kitchen. The house had cooled off. The heater clicked softly. I pulled the envelope back out and looked at the account number again. Didn't match her known personal account. Didn't match our joint. Didn't match the old savings we closed. No, wait. We never closed that one. We merged it, I think. See, that's the problem with memory. It rearranges itself when you need it most. I grabbed the folder where we keep older bank paperwork. Sat on the floor near the pantry light, because it's brighter there. The unknown account wasn't in any of the documents. That's when the curiosity started forming, quiet and steady. There was one thing I kept coming back to. The transfer amount. It never changed. Not once in 3 years. Life changes. Prices change. Needs change. But this amount stayed exact. Why? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I checked the dates again. Always within a day of the 14th. Sometimes the 13th if the 14th fell on a weekend. That kind of consistency doesn't happen by accident. I thought about fraud. Identity theft. Someone spoofing her information. That would have almost been a relief. Something external. Something we could fight together. But the handwriting on the back of that statement kept pulling me back. 2 words. I still didn't understand why they were there. Or why the envelope had come to the house instead of her usual digital statements. That was another thing. She'd switched to paperless years ago. I remember helping her set it up. So why was this printed? See how the questions start multiplying. I told myself there had to be a clean explanation. Maybe the bank changed policies. Maybe she'd requested paper copies for tax reasons. She does that sometimes, gets organized all at once. For about 20 minutes, I felt calm, almost relieved. There's a strange comfort in deciding something isn't what it looks like. The body relaxes. Shoulders drop. Breathing steadies. I even put the statement back and turned off the pantry light. False calm. Because as I was heading toward the hallway, I realized something that stopped me mid-step. If she had switched back to paper statements, why hadn't she mentioned it? It's a small detail, but marriages are built on small details. And suddenly, I wasn't sure which ones were still real. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was panicking. It was quieter than that. The kind of wakefulness where you just lie there, listening to the house settle. The air kicked on twice. I counted. Or maybe it was 3 times. Hard to say. Time stretches when your brain won't settle. She slept on her side, back toward me. Same way she has for years. One hand under the pillow. Steady breathing. Nothing suspicious about a sleeping person. That's what I kept telling myself. In the morning, she left at 6:40. I watched her taillights disappear past the maple tree. Waited a full 5 minutes before moving. I made coffee. Sat down at the table. Pulled the statement back out. I decided to call the bank. Not accuse. Just inquire. I remember rehearsing the tone in my head. Casual. Confused husband voice. Not suspicious. Not confrontational. When the woman on the phone asked for the account number, I read it slowly. She asked for verification details. That's when I hit the first wall. I wasn't authorized on that account. She couldn't give me information. Privacy policy. I almost laughed. Not at her. Just at the timing. I asked if she could at least confirm whether it was active. She said yes. Active. In good standing. Opened 3 years ago. That part tightened something in my chest. 3 years exactly. I hung up politely. Thanked her. She had no idea what she'd just done. I sat there a minute, staring at the steam coming off my mug. I considered the possibility that this was still innocent. Maybe she opened a savings account for something personal. A surprise. A trip. A gift. Anniversaries coming up next month. That thought actually steadied me. See, there are explanations. I even allowed myself a small smile at the idea that I might be unraveling a birthday surprise or something. But then I flipped to the transaction history again. The transfers weren't deposits into her account. They were outgoing. Every month. Same amount. To the same external destination. That's when the relief thinned out. Just a little. I decided not to confront her. Not yet. If this was something innocent, barging in with suspicion would damage more than whatever this was. So I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her laptop that evening. She was in the shower. I told myself I was just looking for confirmation. Not snooping. There's a difference, I thought. There probably isn't. Her banking site required a password I didn't know. That wasn't new. We'd always respected each other's logins. I almost closed it, but I noticed something in her bookmarks bar. A saved link to a payment platform I didn't recognize. Not the usual ones. I clicked it. It redirected to a login page. The username field was autofilled. Her email. That was clue number 1. I stared at that login page for a long time. The shower water stopped. I closed the laptop quickly and stepped away. False reassurance tried to creep back in. Maybe it's for work. Maybe she volunteers somewhere. Maybe this is tied to something charitable. I clung to that one. Charity made sense. Regular monthly amount. Consistent date. It felt plausible. That night at dinner, I watched her differently. She laughed at something on her phone. Showed me a picture of Denise's dog, wearing a birthday hat. Normal. Again. Too normal. I almost told her then. Almost slid the envelope across the table and said, "Help me understand this." But I didn't. Instead, I asked a soft question. "You still doing that simplified account thing? The personal one?" She didn't hesitate. "Yeah." "Why?" "Just curious. Bank sent something odd. Probably a mix-up." She shrugged. Took a bite of her food. "Banks are messy lately." And that was it. No visible shift in her face. No stumble. No extra questions. That calm response should have reassured me. It didn't, because it was too smooth. Later that night, I went back to the kitchen and pulled the envelope out again. I held it up under the light. That slightly crooked return address. I turned it over. Those 2 words. Still there. I realized something I hadn't let myself fully consider yet. If this wasn't fraud, and it wasn't charity, then I had a decision to make. Trust her explanation, or verify it myself. And once you cross into verification, something changes. You can't uncross it. I stood there in the dim kitchen light, envelope in hand, and understood that whatever I chose next was going to shift the ground beneath us. I just didn't know how far it would sink. I waited 4 more days before I did anything. Not because I was calm, because I wanted to be sure I wasn't reacting to smoke. Thursday afternoon, I left work early. Told my supervisor I had a plumbing issue at home. He didn't ask questions. I don't call in favors often. Instead of going home, I drove to the bank branch downtown. Not our usual one. The older one with the brick exterior and the faded American flag out front. I don't know why I chose that branch. Maybe I didn't want to see anyone who recognized us. Inside, it smelled like carpet cleaner and printer ink. I asked to speak with a manager. Said it was about a joint financial concern. Used words like household discrepancy. The manager was a younger guy. Late 20s maybe. Clean haircut. Nervous smile. I explained that I'd received a statement for an account I didn't recognize tied to my wife's name, and that I was concerned about possible fraud. He asked for the account number. Typed. Paused. Looked at the screen a little longer than necessary. And then he said something that landed quietly but heavy. The mailing address on file for this account isn't your home address. Wave 1. I felt it in my fingertips first. What is it? I asked. He hesitated. Privacy policy again. But I pressed just enough. Not aggressive. Just firm. He couldn't give me the full address. But he confirmed it was local. Same city. Different zip code. Local. Not out of state. Not overseas. Not some random fraud hub. Local meant proximity. I thanked him. Left before my face did something I couldn't control. Sat in my truck for a while. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe longer. I told myself there were still explanations. Maybe she used a P.O. box for privacy. Maybe it was connected to something sensitive. Medical. Legal. Something she didn't want mixed with the house mail. That thought almost steadied me again. Almost. Because then I remembered the payment platform bookmark on her laptop. And the consistency of the transfers. I drove home slower than usual. The afternoon sun was low. Traffic thick. In the driveway, I noticed something small. Her car wasn't there. She told me she had a late meeting that day. I think she mentioned it Monday. Or was it Tuesday? No, it was Monday night. After dinner, I went inside. The house felt cooler than usual. I sat at the kitchen table again. Same chair as before. I pulled out the statement and laid it flat. 3 years. Same amount. Local address. Different zip code. And then I did something that shifted everything. I checked our joint account history. For the very first month, that transfer appeared. The first outgoing payment. I traced it back. And that's when wave 2 hit. The very first transfer, the one that started it all, happened the same week we refinanced the house. Same week. I remember that refinance clearly. We were tight on money back then. Interest rates had dropped. We rolled some debt into the mortgage. Felt like a fresh start. I remember her saying, "This will give us breathing room." I'd agreed. But the breathing room never really showed up. There was always something. Car repairs. Insurance adjustments. Unexpected expenses. And now I was staring at the first transfer dated 3 days after the refinance funds cleared. 3 days. Which meant that whatever this was, it wasn't random. It started when we had extra cash. I leaned back in the chair. The wood creaked under me. I realized my hands were cold. I tried to calculate in my head how much had been transferred over 3 years. I got the math wrong the first time. Added an extra 0. Had to redo it. Still, the total was enough to matter. Enough to explain why we never quite caught up. Enough to explain the tension I'd felt every tax season. I stood up and walked to the hallway. Looked at our wedding photo on the wall. 22 years ago. Younger faces. Simpler eyes. I almost convinced myself again that this could still be something else. Maybe she'd help someone. A family member in trouble. A friend. A quiet obligation she didn't want to burden me with. That would have hurt, but it wouldn't have broken me. As I stood there, I noticed something small I'd missed before. On the kitchen counter, under the fruit bowl, was a folded receipt. From a gas station. In the zip code the bank manager mentioned. Dated last week. I hadn't known she'd been over there. I didn't know why that mattered yet. But it did. And for the first time since opening that envelope, I felt the ground drop fully beneath me. Because this wasn't just money anymore. This was movement. This was intention. And I was no longer standing in confusion. I was standing at the edge of something I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I didn't confront her that night either. That probably sounds weak. Maybe it was. But once you realize something is deliberate, you don't rush. You slow down. Every step matters. I sat at the kitchen table again. Seems like that table's been witness to most of this. And I laid everything out in front of me. The statement, the refinance date, the gas station receipt from the other zip code, and the 2 words on the back of the page. I hadn't told you yet. They said for us. That was it. Not for us, love. Not for us someday. Just for us. I must have read it 50 times by then. Maybe more. The ink had pressed hard into the paper. I could feel the indentation when I ran my finger across it. She'd written it with intention. And that's when something shifted in me. Because for us didn't sound like betrayal. It sounded like justification. That scared me more. I went back to the refinance paperwork, dug it out from the metal filing box in the closet. The box squeaks when it opens, always has. I remember oiling it once, or meaning to. 3 days after the refinance funds hit our account. That first transfer left her personal one, which means she'd moved money into that account first. Planned, calculated, not impulsive. I leaned back in the chair and let the house sit quiet around me. The fridge hummed again. I swear that hum got louder these past few weeks. Probably didn't. I had 2 choices. Confront her immediately and demand an explanation, or gather more information and risk becoming someone I never wanted to be. Here's the part that still unsettles me. I chose the second one. I drove to that other zip code the next afternoon. Told work I had a dentist appointment. I don't lie easily. My voice fell off when I said it. The area wasn't bad. Not run down. Just older. Small duplexes. Narrow streets. A convenience store on the corner with sun-faded soda posters in the window. I parked across from the gas station listed on the receipt. Waited. Felt stupid. I told myself I was just confirming whether she had a pattern there. Maybe it was near a client's office. Maybe there was a gym. Something ordinary. Then I saw her car. It pulled up to the curb 2 blocks down. She didn't park at the gas station. She parked in front of a small beige duplex with peeling trim around the windows. She sat in the car for a minute. Then she got out, walked up to the front door, knocked once, and someone opened it almost immediately. I couldn't see who from where I was parked. She stepped inside. Door closed. I stayed in that truck for, I don't know, 20 minutes? Maybe longer. Time did that stretchy thing again. I didn't storm up to the house. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't even get out. I just sat there. And this is where I need to say something that might split people. I had no proof of an affair. None. I had money transfers. A second address. A visit. That's it. It could have been anything. A relative. A secret project. Something medical. Something complicated. But sitting there, watching my wife enter a house I didn't know about, in a neighborhood she'd never mentioned, I felt the line inside me move. And here's the moral part one still wrestle with. I followed her the next week. Twice. Not every day. Just enough to confirm it wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't. Same house. Same knock. Same quick entry. I didn't record it. Didn't take photos. I wasn't building a case. I was building certainty. And the more certain I became, the less sure I was about what kind of man I was turning into. Spying on your spouse changes you, even if you think you're justified. There was one afternoon where I almost walked up to that door. Hand was on the truck handle. Heart steady, strangely enough. Then I thought about those 2 words again. For us. What if I was about to destroy something that had an explanation? What if I was about to accuse her of something that would fracture us permanently? But what if I didn't? What if 3 more years passed? That's the gray area people don't talk about. The place where you're not clearly right or clearly wrong. Just standing in fog, choosing steps. I drove home that day without confronting her. Sat at the kitchen table again. That table seemed more truth than any person. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to ask. But I wasn't going to ask blind. Not anymore. Because if this was for us, then I deserved to know what us meant. I didn't plan a speech. Didn't rehearse lines in the mirror. I waited for Sunday. Sunday nights are accounting nights. She knows that. It's normal. Predictable. Safe. She was on the couch with her laptop again. Same spot. Same throw blanket over her legs. The TV was playing something low. Some renovation show neither of us really watched. I brought the envelope to the table. Set it down. Didn't slide it yet. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I thought they would. Can we look at something together? I asked. She glanced over, smiled slightly. Sure. I slid the statement across. Her eyes moved to the header first, then the account number. Then they stopped. It wasn't dramatic. No gasp. Just stillness. She looked up at me. That came in the mail? She asked. Yes. A beat passed. That account isn't fraud, she said. I nodded once. I figured. Silence filled the room thick and slow. The renovation show kept playing. Someone talking about backsplash tile. I turned the page over. Her handwriting faced up. For us. She stared at it longer than I expected. Then she exhaled. Not sharply. Just released air. I didn't know how to tell you, she said. That sentence could mean 100 things. I stayed quiet. She closed her laptop, set it aside, folded her hands in her lap. It's not what you think. That line almost made me laugh, but I didn't. Then tell me what it is, I said. Short, even. She hesitated, looked toward the hallway, then back at me. And here's where the near miss happened. She almost told me it was a savings account. I saw it in her face. The half-formed explanation. The safe lie. But she didn't take it. Instead she said, there's someone living in that duplex. I waited. My son. The word didn't land at first. I blinked. I had him before I met you. The room felt smaller. I was 19. My parents handled everything. They arranged an adoption. My brain tried to reorganize the last 22 years around that sentence. She kept talking. I found him 3 years ago. He reached out. Through a registry. 3 years. Refinance week. For us, she said again, but softer now. I thought if I could help him quietly, if I could make sure he was okay, maybe one day I'd tell you, when it made sense. The renovation show cut to commercial. The TV got louder for a second before auto-adjusting. I stood up, walked to the kitchen sink, turned the faucet on. Didn't need water, just needed sound. My son. No, her son. I corrected myself. Then wasn't sure. You've been seeing him, I said. Not a question. Yes. How often? Once a week. Sometimes twice. For 3 years. She nodded. And here's where I almost lost it. Not in anger. In scale. 3 years of visits. Conversations. A relationship forming. And I had no idea. Why not tell me? I asked. She looked at me in a way I hadn't seen before. Not defensive. Not guilty. Afraid. I didn't know if you'd see him as ours. Or as mine. There it was. The moral split. Was I supposed to feel betrayed? Or excluded? Or protective? Or grateful she was helping him? All of it mixed. How much money? I asked. She told me. It matched what I calculated. Does he work? Part-time. He's trying. I leaned back against the counter. Felt the edge dig into my spine. You refinanced the house, I said slowly. To help him. She shook her head. No. We refinanced for us. I just used some of the breathing room. Breathing room. That word again. Why the separate address? I asked. I didn't want statements coming here. Fair. Logical. Secret. I realized something then. If I had confronted her in anger weeks ago, she might have taken that safer lie. Savings account. Surprise fund. But because I waited, she chose truth. Or maybe she was just tired of carrying it. There was one more thing I had to ask. Does he know about me? She hesitated. Yes. That hit differently. He didn't want to disrupt your life. She added quickly. Disrupt. I almost smiled at that. I walked back to the table. Sat down. I wasn't yelling. But I wasn't settled either. You made me feel like we were always just short, I said. Like we were barely staying ahead. She swallowed. I know. And here's where I question myself. Was I angry about the money? Or about not being chosen as part of the decision? I looked at the envelope again. That crooked return address. The detail that started all this. You were building something, I said. Without me. She didn't deny it. The room went quiet again. And I realized the climax wasn't an explosion. It was a question. What do you do when betrayal isn't about cheating, but about secrecy? And are those two things really that different? We didn't solve it that night. There wasn't a clean ending waiting in the kitchen. We sat there a long time. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just two people realizing their marriage had been running on parallel tracks without noticing. She told me his name. I won't repeat it here. That feels like something that still belongs to him. 23 years old. Works part-time at an auto parts store. Taking community college classes on and off. Apartment, well, duplex, barely furnished when she first saw it. Mattress on the floor. Folding chair. One lamp. I couldn't just walk away again, she said. Again. That word carried weight. I asked her what he knew about me. She said he knew she'd married. Knew I existed. Knew I didn't know about him. He didn't want to come between us, she said. That sentence did something strange inside me. Because here's where the third thing happened. The one I didn't expect. A week later, she asked if I'd meet him. Not at the duplex. Neutral ground. Coffee shop near the highway. I almost said no. Actually, I think I did say no at first. Then I corrected myself. Said, I don't know. Which is different. We went the following Saturday. The place smelled like burnt espresso and floor cleaner. Mid-morning crowd. College kids on laptops. An older couple arguing softly near the window. He was already there. And here's the part people might not like. He stood up when we walked in. Not aggressive. Not territorial. Just respectful. He looked nervous. Kept adjusting the sleeve of his hoodie. Same shade of brown hair as my wife. Same crease near the left eye when he squinted. He shook my hand. Firm. Sir, he said. I almost told him not to call me that, but I didn't know what else he was supposed to call me. We sat. The conversation wasn't dramatic. No speeches. No accusations. Just awkward honesty. He thanked me. For what? I'm still not entirely sure. For not being angry at her, he said at one point. I hadn't realized that was visible. He said he told her not to send money at first, that he could manage, that he didn't want to take from her real family. That phrase caught on my chest. Real family. I looked at him then. Really looked. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't some secret life she'd been hiding for excitement. He was a young man who'd grown up without her, who'd found her, who didn't know where he fit. That didn't erase the secrecy. It didn't erase the 3 years of transfers, but it complicated the picture. There was a moment, small, almost forgettable, where he talked about fixing up an old motorcycle with parts from the store. His eyes lit up for half a second. Then he caught himself and quieted down. That flicker. That was human. And I hated that it softened me. Because anger is easier. Clear lines are easier. On the drive home, I didn't say much. She didn't push. The house felt the same when we walked in. Same clock ticking. Same fridge humming. But something fundamental had shifted. We made a few decisions in the weeks after. The money transfers would stop in that form. If we helped him, it would be transparent. Joint decision. Budgeted. He'd come to dinner once a month. We wouldn't pretend he'd always been there. We wouldn't pretend he hadn't. Here's the incomplete part. Trust doesn't snap back into place just because the secret makes sense. There are still moments when she leaves the house, and I feel that old tightening in my chest. It's less now, but it's there. And there are moments when I wonder why she didn't believe I could handle the truth 3 years ago. We haven't fully answered that. Maybe we never will. I also haven't figured out what he is to me. Not my son. Not my son. Something in between. There was one night recently, about a month ago, when he stayed after dinner to help me fix the loose hinge on the garage door. We stood side by side in the fading light, tools laid out on the workbench. He handed me the wrench without being asked. Small thing, but deliberate. And for a second, it felt almost natural. Almost. That's where we are. Not broken. Not untouched. Somewhere in the middle. And I still don't know if I would have acted differently if I'd opened that envelope and confronted her immediately. Maybe we'd have avoided weeks of quiet suspicion. Or maybe she'd have chosen the safer lie. I don't know. But I do know this. Secrets don't always hide monsters. Sometimes they hide people who are just trying to fix an old wound the wrong way. I still open the mail every afternoon. That hasn't changed. The mailbox lid squeaks when I lift it. Been meaning to tighten the hinge. I probably will this spring. Or maybe I won't. Some things you live with. Paper statements don't come anymore. We fixed that. Everything's transparent now. Login shared. Budget meetings done together instead of in parallel rooms. But transparency doesn't erase memory. Sometimes I still picture that first afternoon in the kitchen. The light coming in sideways, the hum of the fridge, the weight of that paper in my hand. And I think about how close I was to telling a different story. If I had let anger lead, I could have blown up 22 years in a single night. Accusations. Words you can't pull back. Maybe you would have stayed a secret forever after that. Or maybe she would have told me anyway. I don't know. That's the thing about crossroads. You only ever walk one direction, and the other path just becomes imagination. What I've learned, and I'm still learning it, is that secrecy and betrayal aren't always twins. They look alike from a distance, feel alike at first touch, but sometimes secrecy grows out of fear, not disloyalty. Does that make it right? No, but it makes it human. There's still a part of me that wishes she trusted me sooner. That part shows up when we're paying bills, and I notice how tight the margins were for those 3 years. It shows up when I remember sitting at that same table wondering why we never seemed to get ahead. And I've had to admit something uncomfortable. Some of that tension wasn't just about money. It was about control. I liked being the one who handled things. Balanced accounts, made projections, managed risk. It made me feel steady, necessary. When she built something outside that system, even for a reason that makes sense, it shook that identity. I had to ask myself whether I was more hurt by the secrecy or by the loss of control. That question's still open. And here's the one I'll leave with you. If someone you love keeps something from you out of fear, not malice, does that change how you judge it? Not in theory, in your own life. Because most of us will face that line at some point. Maybe not about money, maybe not about a hidden child, but about something that sits in that gray space between protection and deception. I won't pretend we've tied everything in a bow. He still calls me sir sometimes. I've told him he doesn't have to. He's trying to find his place. So am I. She still gets quiet when the topic drifts near those early years. I don't push as hard as I used to, but I don't ignore it either. We're rebuilding trust the slow way, with shared calendars, with open statements, with hard conversations that don't end in slammed doors. And every now and then, when I see him laugh at something in our kitchen, leaning back in the same chair I've sat in for 2 decades, I realize something strange. The story I thought was about betrayal was actually about expansion. Messy, unplanned, painful expansion. That envelope with the crooked return address didn't destroy my marriage. It exposed a fracture that was already there. Not a break, just a thin line where fear had settled. We're sealing it now, slowly. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Trust isn't the absence of secrets. It's the decision to face them without burning everything down.